justice isn't determined by me. Justice isn't determined by you. Justice isn't even determined by our governments. Justice is not determined by nature. Justice is determined by God.
Yeah.
That He is the ultimate one who can determine what is right and what is wrong. And so the quick objection would be like, I don't even believe in God, you know? And I say, we see the results of this lived out. We see, because we were talking about this just earlier ago, where we live in a society where there's injustice that runs rampant. And I just give a statistic, and this kind of just like blew my mind too. I say it is estimated that 2.3%, or between 2.3% and 5% of all prisoners in the U.S. are innocent. But I say, however, if it's just 1% that are innocent, that would be more than 20,000 prisoners who are in jail who ain't do nothing wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a crazy thing to think about, because I remember when I was talking about wisdom with Melvin, and just saying, because my history, my father's been in and out of jail,
Mm-hmm.
and so I can speak on his behalf, and he's told me that he just made bad decisions,
Mm-hmm.
you know, just made unwise choices. However, there's an instance where people do make wise choices and still end up
Mm-hmm.
in prison,
Yeah.
you know. And it's like, there are people, whether, you know, I know the common thing is everybody who's is in jail says they're innocent, but to a degree, there are people who are in jail who haven't committed any crime,
Yeah.
you know. And it's like, what do we do with them? Like, is it just tough luck? How do we live in a world where that's okay, where an innocent is in jail and someone who is guilty is free to go?
Yeah.
Like, what happens to them? You know, if I come from an atheistic or an evolutionary worldview who doesn't believe in God, it's like, what of these people?
Yeah.
You know, what kind of world do we live in where this is acceptable?
Yeah, and I think the interesting thing is in situations like that, it's real easy, no matter what you believe, to proclaim, yeah, that's not right.
Mm-hmm.
But again, now we brought up this concept of right and wrong, true, false, just, unjust, with no standard. Because I could say, you know what, he probably didn't commit that crime, but he probably committed another one, so it's perfectly fine that he's in jail for 20 years, even though he was innocent. And if you respond, that's not right either.
Yeah.
What you can't, if you think something is right and I think something is wrong, and we're defining justice individualistically, or even on a government level, then we have to say, okay, the government may have made a mistake, but they're still just.
Mm-hmm.
But anybody in their right mind will say, no, that's not right. Okay, well then, if we can't determine it individually, we can't determine it through people, through popular culture, through the government, then there has to be, like you said, there's got to be something bigger, something more, something that is perfect, because only justice can come from, true justice can only be perfect.
And you hitting it right on the head, because if I come from the worldview where I say, you know, God doesn't even exist, then you are fine with an innocent person being in jail. You're fine with a guilty person walking free.
Mm-hmm. You have to be.
You have to be, because nothing is ultimately going to happen to them.
Yeah.
You know. But if I believe that all men is appointed that a man die and stand before the judge,
Mm-hmm.
that man is ultimately going to be accountable for what he does. And it's
Mm-hmm.
like, though it's not something that happens in the immediate sense, I can rest assured I can't live in a world where it's just like someone is not going to be held accountable for the wrong things that they do.
Yeah.
But denying God, you have to be fine with that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, I don't know how you could sleep at night knowing that there's someone walking free, because you give that extreme example of what? Murder, kill, rape,
Mm-hmm.
you know? And it's like, what happens to them if they go free?
Yeah.
You know, what happens?
Yeah.
But I can rest assured that even though I would want them to get caught on this side of heaven, that you're going to die one day and you're going to stand before the judge and give an account.
Yeah.
You know, and that's how we reconcile this. And you were making the point that in order to judge, you've got to be perfect. And this is what I say. Only God can adequately exercise justice, because He alone is just. This is a claim that no human can ascribe to themselves. No matter how much I want to believe it, I haven't dealt justice with everybody.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't. If you're going to be a true, because this is what we say. We say, don't judge me, right? We say only God can judge. Why? Because we understand I've lied, so I can't call you out of being a liar.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I stole, I can't call you out of being a stolen, because how I'm holding you accountable for something that I don't hold myself accountable,
Yeah.
but God can, because He's the only perfect, just person who can hold someone accountable. And it's like, in pointing to God, it's like, and saying that he is the one who judges justly. And 2 weeks ago, we were talking about the problem of evil.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was like an affront to God, because the normal retort would be, okay, if I agree that, okay, God exists and this God is just, why do all these bad things happen? You know, if we don't look to nature to determine justice, why do we see illness? Why do we see natural disasters? Why do we see carnage? And so I think Pastor Jerome was saying this is the theodicy. You know, how does a good, perfect, and just God allow evil to happen? And I'm curious to see, given that question, how do you respond?
Yeah, I think the only proper response to that question is a question. And that question would be, if anybody poses the question of, okay, if there is a God and he is perfect, how does he allow all these evil things to happen? The question is, the return question is, how would you answer that question in light of yourself?
There we go.
So if your claim is that, okay, if God is perfect and he can't allow any evil to exist, then why are we still breathing? Why are you still breathing? Why are you still alive? Because if we follow your logic and say, well, if God is perfect and he can't allow anything evil or anything wrong to ever happen or ever exist, then the fact that when I was 10 years old and I was stealing candy out of the gas station on a daily basis on my way to school, God should have obliterated me and wiped me off the face of the earth in that moment, because that was wrong. That was evil. So I think any time that question comes up, we have to respond with, why are you still here? Why are you still alive? Why are you still breathing? If we follow your logic, then we have to answer the question of, are you perfect? No. Why do you exist?
And you hit it right on the head, because when, like I said, debunking the idea that justice is determined on an individual, collective, or naturalistic basis, and saying that it's determined by God, then God is that standard. Because what we have, this idea of evil, we think, like again, going back to your scenario, we think the rapist is evil, we think the murderer is evil. Those are our definitions of evil. But what? Our standard is what? Perfection. You know, anything that falls short of that, that's what's evil. And we don't like to we like to think well of ourselves. We like to think that we're good people. I never did anything that bad. But what are you comparing yourself to? You're comparing yourself to another man. I can find another man I'm better than. But that's not your standard of good. Your standard of good is what? Perfection. That's what you judge yourself up against. And so going based off that, I also say, you know, and falling in line with, let's ask a question. Like we and the book is called Burden of Proof. The burden of proof isn't on me, because if I ascend to your point that there isn't a God, you still have to explain why bad things happen. You know, you still have to answer that question. It still doesn't answer the question, like, because, okay, so God doesn't exist, why does natural disasters happen? And the point that I make is that these things prove that there must be a God, because what? There must be an answer, there must be a remedy for all that is wrong in the world, because we can perceive something is wrong, but how do you perceive something is wrong if you don't have a standard of good? I said, let me see if I can find that quote that I had, because I thought it was real good. I say
121.
It might be a different page. I say, man, essentially I was saying that, you know, there must be what? Life among the deaf. There must be reconciliation among the destruction. That anytime we see something is wrong, we understand that what? That there must, like, let's see if I can give a really good example. We see these infomercials, you know, where the child is in Africa and they're eating, you know, from the trash. But according to them, they think what they're eating is good. They just have some food. But for us, we know it's rotten, because we've seen what fresh is. And so when we see that there's something wrong, we know that there must be an element of good. And that's kind of, I love arguing for the existence of God from a theodicy, because if you can identify that something is evil, then that means you have there must be a concept of good for you to judge something as evil. And so when we talk about all the bad things that happen, I'm arguing that they make the point that what? That the reconciliation must happen.
Yeah.
that God is the only solution to all these bad things that are happening.
Yeah.
That the natural disaster, and this is the thing, because what we say is, because all of these things happen, we can't blame it on nature, because nature is impersonal.
Mm-hmm.
I can't just say, darn you, nature, because what does that do? But I can say, God, you the one who caused this. It's like I can find fault in God because he's personal.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like the thing that kills me is like, I can find fault in God, but not in myself.
Yeah.
That I can hold God to a standard that I don't even hold myself, because this is another argument that people will say. They say, how can I believe in a God and there's people who are starving? Okay, so you holding God to a standard that, what are you doing about the people who are starving? You know, it's like we can find fault in him, but not in ourselves.
Yeah, and it's real easy, man, to find that fault in God. It's real easy to blame someone else. It's real easy to point the finger at what somebody else did. Me and my wife, talk about this all the time. How she'll say, "Hey, you offended me when you blah blah blah," and my immediate response is, "Well, you offended me when."
Mm-hmm.
So it's in order to defend my character, I want to come at somebody else's character, and we do that a lot with God. Like, why are people starving? If God is real, if God is just, then why are people starving? But because you have a surplus that you refuse to share.
Mm.
So let's not point and ask God, what is God doing? Let's look at, okay, what is my part in this,
Mm-hmm.
before I begin to challenge God? Because challenging God is he. You said we want to hold God to a standard that we're not even living. We want to hold God to the standard of perfection, but then we want to believe that our imperfection is okay. Like, God has to be perfect, but it's okay if I'm not perfect, right? And that in and of itself delineates the fact that I believe God is higher than me.
Yeah.
He has to be higher than me. If I can believe that he should be perfect, but I don't have to be, then that is an intrinsic, is an internal, is a natural longing, a truth in our hearts that he's perfect. I don't have to be perfect. I can't be perfect. Then what?
Yeah.
So it leaves it begs a question that doesn't have an answer without looking to the God who is perfect.
Nah, that's a great point, and I think I found that quote, and I just wanted to throw that out because I thought it was a pretty good quote. I say, when bad things happen, it proves there must be a standard of good. It proves there must be harmony among the carnage, redemption among the destruction, and life among the sickness. The awful tragedies we witness in the world scream out to us, there is something terribly wrong. These things do not prove God doesn't exist. Rather, they demonstrate that God is our only hope in solving the problem. So we identify that there's a problem.
Yeah.
That there's a problem, and it's like we're only highlighting the root of the problem. We say, this tornado came through and wiped out all these people, and it's like, God, where were you? Sicknesses, my mom or my family members suffering from cancer. It's like, God, where were you? And we just see all this carnage, all this wickedness, and we're like, God, why don't you act on our behalf? We imploring God to act on our behalf, and it's like, he was God.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's so easy because evil then becomes something external. Evil is over there. Evil is over here. Instead of what evil? It's right here, and that's what you hit on. We don't realize that in the story of life that we're the villains.
Yeah.
We don't realize that. We think we're the good guys. No, we're the villains. And it's so, in answering the question, what's the cause of all the symptoms that we see that are the ills that plague the world? This was sin.
Yeah.
It's us.
Yeah.
It's us. And I go back to Genesis. And we all know that account of Adam and Eve. And I don't know if you've ever thought this to yourself. It's like, what was their sin? They just ate from a tree. Like, what's so bad about that?
Yeah.
I don't know if you ever thought and filtered that through. Like, what was so bad about? They didn't do nothing that bad. What was so wrong that the whole entire world fell under sin and chaos?